Council Club on St. Patrick's Day. We are grateful to those who showed up. We don't blame you if you're not here. It's going to be maybe a quick conversation this evening because there isn't actually a meeting on the 22nd. Today's obviously the 17th. They're skipping the meeting on the 22nd. There are some exciting things happening the following week on the 29th. So we decided as a group last week that we would meet this time just to kind of talk about the library stuff, the streetcar stuff. There's just like so much going on. We figured it would be a worthwhile conversation to continue to have this week. So we'll jump into it. Last Tuesday, a couple days ago, there was a meeting on the 14th. President Festerson was not there, so Vice President Palermo, Vinny, led the meeting, which I noticed right away. He used the light signal situation, but he gave folks 5 minutes. So that's different because usually Festerson just kind of lets folks go, which is, I mean, at first I was like, that's nice. And now I'm kind of like, well, except for some folks really talk for a long time. But the main, I think the bulk of the meeting was around item number 9, which was a preliminary plat with a redevelopment project on Saddle Creek by Pacific. So right now it's kind of just behind the Bakers there that's on Saddle Creek. This redevelopment project would be just to the south of that a touch, and it would involve paving 49th Ave, which is currently just kind of like a green space that the neighborhood has kind of taken over as their own park-ish kind of. And so that's part of it. But the other thing is there was some kind of discrepancies between what Larry Jobin, who I think should have been on the radio. He's got a good, like, deep baritone voice. Anyway, Larry Jobin was representing the applicant. And he was like, we've had plenty of meetings, and the neighbors are like, actually, there was only one and it was virtual. So yeah, a lot of folks showed up in opposition, and that thing we hear a lot, which is, oh, you know what, this is a long process and there will be other opportunities for you to weigh in. And it's just like, yo, but they're here right now. So like, maybe you could give them the time of day. It just seemed like really, yeah. And Lori, you're right, that all the people that were in opposition to that development is why he used the timer. I think you're right. Because he kind of got a feel for who all was going to talk at the beginning, and a lot of people raised their hands to say, yeah, we're here in opposition. They also were at the planning board meeting. We watched planning board meetings too, and a lot of the same folks tried to stop it there. They were told to go to city council. Now city council telling them that this isn't really the right meeting and there's a lot of other opportunities, and you know, the old runaround. So
yeah, I feel like it was a great example of
not it.
No, but like, where is public input? Where does public input, if your last name is not Jay Noddle, if your name is not Jay Noddle, if you're not a developer, if you're just a lowly citizen, homeowner, yeah. I mean, several of the people lived next door to this, you know, this giant building, and it just kind of seemed like there is no space for their voice. Like, they kind of just patted him on the, I mean, Begley was just like, hey, did you get, he even asked one of the neighbors to come back up. And I was like, hey, do you have any more questions? And she's like, yeah, I've got a bunch of questions and a bunch of things that I'm not happy about. It's just like, okay, you got everything answered? Okay, then we're gonna vote this through. It's just, it seems like they put him in the hot seat for, that was probably a half hour or almost an hour.
It was over an hour of discussion totally on that.
So they put him in the hot seat for an hour. They give maybe a little wag of the finger, like, you should have had more public meetings, but you had at least one. And then that's it. And we talked about how they shouldn't be called public meetings. They should be called presentations, or, because there is no back and forth. There is
never a dialogue.
If only thing they can have questions about would be questions about the presentation. And
as a resident, you can't ask questions to the council. You can't even ask.
Well, even at these meetings, these developer meetings, neighborhood meetings.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like only questions like they can, because they said they asked questions and they'd be like, and all they could say, they could just be like, oh, we don't have that information yet. The plan's not finalized yet.
Right.
And then they're going to be like, well, we have concerns about your proposal, and we would like to, you know, help or give you input before this is a done deal, so you don't have to go back to the drawing board, go back to the planning board meeting. And I feel like they were just like, we don't care about anything, like any of the public. We don't care about the public. Like, this is not about you. This is about our development. And
I kind of hate to say this, but I mean, you guys already know this. I think to some degree it depends on the neighborhood, because if they, so I'm just thinking back to like neighborhood meetings or public meetings that have happened in my neighborhood. And there is back and forth at those kinds of meetings. I mean, there's still quite a bit of, you know, patting on the head, very patronizing language.
Yeah.
But, you know, I've been to meetings at UNO, at Dundee Elementary, at, you know, various places where at least you can have a back and forth. But that's a long way of me getting to what I really want to ask about the planning board. So you guys, like, I have never been to a planning board meeting. I've never watched one. I mean, how it seems like you guys have at least seen some of that, whether in person or virtually. Can you describe a little bit about what you've observed and how that works?
Yeah. The planning, so like, you know how we get excited at city council if maybe it's like a 3-4 vote or there's like a little bit of discussion or whatever, that never happens in the planning board. It is 99% of the time 7-0 rubber stamp, if all of them are even there. It's all white men except for one token Black woman, Sydney Franklin. And yeah, there's not a lot of questions. Eric England from the planning department sits up there and he's usually the one that's like, kind of runs you through the project and says planning board recommends approval. And a lot of times there's little to no discussion. It's
and
similar.
Remind me, how do those people get there? Are they appointed by the mayor?
Ding, ding, ding.
Oh, fuck.
Exactly. So big shocker there. It's not terribly productive. Aside from just bankroll and developers, you know, just like stamp next, as long as it's, yeah.
it's a how can I say this? So the first Wednesday of every month. There's only one planning board meeting a month.
Yeah.
And I think the last planning board meeting, they brought Jay Noddle up, and it was just like you could just see them like bowing down and be like, "Oh, thank you, Mr. Noddle, for blessing us with all of your great ideas, and what can we do to help you?" And then like, you know, some citizens, some neighborhoods. I think that was one that Jen Bauer had gone to.
And that's actually, TIFF is on the 29th.
And they were just like, okay, get this woman out of here. Oh, and when Dewan went to the planning board meeting, they made fun of him.
Yeah.
After they were just
after he left.
Yeah, after he left, they're just like, next time I will not let that person talk as long as he did. Or they
No, what happened was, so Dewan gave, you know, a passionate speech about how he thinks no one wants the damn Lanahaw Mutual of Omaha project. We want a freaking library. Anyway, so he, you know, gives a big speech. They kind of have Lanahaw come up to answer some of his questions, to which he's like, I can't solve the world's problems, but I do know that we had people from New York help us with the design, whatever. So then Dewan gets up to leave, and Rosenbaum, who's the president of the planning board, was like, Dewan, they're going to answer your questions. Don't you want to stay? And Dewan at first was like, no, because you're not listening. And then he's like, you know what? I will do one better than you, and I will sit here and listen. And so he stayed and listened. And then, you know, of course, it still got voted 7-0, went on through, and then Dewan left. And then at the very end, like after they finished the rest of their agenda, Rosenbaum, who asked Dewan if he wanted to stay, he's like, oh, sorry, guys. Next time I won't ask him if he wants to stay. Ha ha. And everyone's like, yeah, you should just let him walk out. God, then we had to hear from him again. It's just like, man,
oh, what a jerk.
Yeah, exactly. It just goes to show how little they value public input. And so that's why, for me personally, it's hard for me to encourage folks to show up at these places that are disrespectful and rarely impactful.
But then at that same meeting, that was the one where the church bell was too.
Oh, yeah.
And so like, it's not 100% of the time. And that one seemed to be, because they were like, okay, you are breaking this noise ordinance. So as long as your project or whatever it is that you're at the planning board meeting, as long as we joke about, as long as it's on white paper.
Yeah, and you dotted all your I's.
As long as it meets the master plan and all those kind of things. I mean, neighborhood alliances be damned. It's not about them. It's about is this compliant with whatever the,
Yeah. And
um,
we've actually even heard, this was a different development. This was maybe a year, I don't know what's time, but a while ago, there was, some new apartments out west, and the NIMBY crowd came out and they were like, that's where, we don't want those people in our neighborhood type of thing. And they all wore matching outfits, red, like it was very exciting. And they all spoke in front of the planning board. And at the end, the planning, I think it was Rosenbaum again, was like, I really appreciate hearing from all of you. Oh my God, Kenny's here. But you need to go to city council. Like, we're just, again, kind of like we were just saying, they kind of seem to just rubber stamp it through as long as the application is filled out properly. And so in that particular instance, they made it sound like, yeah, you can come here, but like in order to actually get things changed, you need to go to city council. So
Yeah, I kind of feel like maybe we heard that from city council too.
yes, they all
or
say that.
that's what
that-
they call it, the not it game, because they all are
Yeah,
like, oh, you
yeah,
can hear
that, planning board is looking at whether all the forms are completed correctly and whether they comply with whatever zoning regulations or, whatever, like if you follow all the rules.
Yeah.
Nobody's talking about how the rules themselves suck.
Yeah.
And
or
could we
like,
please start rewriting the rules?
Yep.
Which is what the city council's supposed to do. I mean, they're the quote unquote legislative body
Right.
for the city government.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I guess I will say, I think it was either on the I think it was when they were again at planning board, when they were also, hi Kenny, I'm super excited you're here, welcome. So at planning, they were talking about, yay, hi Kenny in real life. Also, I won't pick on you, you can stay off camera, but it's just fun to see here. So they were talking about how, with the urban housing and mobility, like the urban core housing mobility redevelopment plan, they brought that to planning, and Rosenbaum actually was the only no vote on that. It passed, of course, 6-1, but I was surprised. He said that he was bummed, or he didn't say he was bummed. He was disappointed or something. He's like a million-year-old white man. But he was upset that he didn't hear all of the information until like that morning. It hit his desk. And so that was kind of shocking to have him push back on anything, because generally it's not a lot of discussion. So yeah, planning board is like city council, but kind of worse, if that's possible.
Yeah, I kind of feel like they almost need to, I wish they would clarify what the public hearing. Oh, it's.
So I think it's just to give the opportunity and the illusion. To me, it feels a lot of times, obviously I'm jaded, we've talked about this, but it's so that they can say that they've had that public input opportunity. So they can check that box to say, you know what, we listened to the public on this, but
They're not listening.
no, they're in the same room while you're talking at them, is what
Yeah.
it unfortunately feels like. So.
And so at this most recent meeting, the city council meeting, I wanted to go back and see how many times the word rubber stamp was said, because it seems to be catching on that the neighborhood association was just like, you're just going to rubber stamp this through, you're just going to rubber stamp this through. And sure enough, well, so it wasn't actually a 7-0 because Featherston was absent.
Yeah.
And then Councilmember Johnson abstained.
And this is jumping back to last couple days ago, Tuesday, item number 9, which is the vote
Saddle Creek.
on the Saddle Creek.
And so I checked the Nebraska accountability disclosures for a conflict. In the past, Councilmember Johnson will abstain anytime Union Pacific, anytime that's been, she worked for Union Pacific and there doesn't want to be any conflict there. This has had nothing to do with Union Pacific.
Right.
And so we're just kind of just guessing that she kind of maybe didn't want to support the project, but also didn't want to vote no. So then I guess the only other option is just not voting.
Unless anybody else here has any insight on why Johnson would have abstained from that vote. My kind of feeling on it is she, which we'll get to in the next ones, she really brings up a lot how it's really important to talk with the neighborhood and, get feedback from the neighborhood association and like really, so I do appreciate that she's making a point to talk about that. And this one, it seemed pretty clear that the neighbors felt like they've been out of the loop the entire time, and there was not any intentional inclusion. She brings up inclusion a lot, so I feel like that was maybe why she abstained. Because we definitely didn't see UP involved, but that was just.
And then moving forward, so Heartland America Park. That's it, yeah.
Mhm.
They were on the same, was it a replat or realigning Douglas Street? And so she kind of grills the person doing the presentation for the Heartland America Park rezoning or whatever. And she's like, did you meet with the neighborhood association? Will you do this, that, and the other? And the guy's like, I work for the city.
Yeah,
this is a city project. This is like, did you reach to the neighborhood association? And it's kind of like, well, next time you need to reach out to the neighbors. And he's just like,
Okay.
yeah, it was kind of awkward. She kept asking it. I think it was item 10 and 11. Did you reach out to the neighborhood association? And the one person was like, we actually are, did you reach out to me? Because this is in Council District 2. And he's like, yeah, we met at a Scooters. And the guy was like, it was nice. He was just like, okay, I'm just making sure everyone's engaging with the neighborhood.
Counselor
Yeah.
from that district and the neighbors. So I do appreciate that she's at least trying to make a point about talking to the neighborhood and including folks that want to be included. So,
And this, going back to the Saddle Creek,
which PS, that's going to be 195 residential units, market rate, row houses and apartments, kind of a mix. And then 2 small commercial properties as well, probably a credit union and probably a coffee shop is what they thought.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, Council Member Begley lives within 500 feet of that location. And so he's been getting all the notifications and all the
Communication.
so he's definitely, this is like literally in his backyard. And he seemed to do he at least asked everyone, has everyone got their questions answered? And they're like, no. He's like, okay, well, at least I asked you. And I feel like there's nothing they could have done for those people. They're not happy with it. He's just like, it's too bad that you're not happy with it. It's gonna pass.
And sometimes that is just the way it goes. And like, we all know that
You
density
can't-
is an issue and there should be more housing in that area. The neighbors were like, we're for it. We just think it should be closer to Saddle Creek. And then flooding was also brought up. Another opponent, Alex O'Hanlon, she's cool. She's been on the call a few times. She brought up flooding because, as we all know, if you've been in Omaha for any amount of time, you've probably watched Saddle Creek flood yourself. And this will be, more development on the creek.
Oh yeah, she said there was a natural carbonated springs underneath Dingman's. That used to be a carbonated water bottler.
Yeah.
That was some neat history.
Well, there used to be a creek.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why it's called.
That's what they got the name for the street. I thought it's just been
Yeah.
a street since the beginning of time.
So did Begley, I'm sorry, I should have looked this up myself. I'm sorry I'm asking this question, but did Begley vote for that development?
Yes.
Even okay, so he's going to be looking at it every single day of his life.
Yeah.
And listen to all these concerns and still voted for it.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
I
interesting.
can go ahead and tell you that you don't need to ask about any city council question as far as what the vote was. It was a perfect bounce, meaning everything passed 6-0 except the one Councilmember Johnson abstained. So everything on the agenda passed.
Oh my word.
Yeah.
I know that's how it normally goes, but it just,
9.6% of the time, according to my spreadsheets.
yeah, I know. And I love that you track that. Thank you
we're
for doing that.
Covering at a 0.4% of time where it doesn't pass. So
Very exciting. All right, cool. What's else? Okay. Oh, we were talking last week. We wondered, item 20 was for a group living special use permit for New Journeys, which is like a substance abuse kind of halfway house. And the applicant was Lance Brown. And we were like, is that the same recycling football player, Lance Brown?
Nebraska Land Recycling.
Yeah, it is. So I guess he bailed on the recycling project and is now, maybe he's still doing both. I don't know.
I think he's doing
But
both.
so that is that Lance Brown for anyone.
If we would have known, we could have had some zingers. How
Oh
many
my
beer,
God.
how many beer pong tables are there going to be there? Because we know that he's a fan of the beer pong and some other things we have to wait until after we're recording.
Yeah.
To talk about. So stick
The
around
council club gets good at the end.
for the juice.
yeah. Anyway, we're gonna keep rolling. Speaking of juice, the Family Dollar applied for a liquor license. It was one on South 36th Street. And I guess the neighborhood did have some concerns about that establishment selling beer because it's right across the street from like some sports complex or something like that. And so they didn't want it to be just like the single like, I don't know if they're talking about 40s or like what, but they didn't want it to be single serve cans to go.
They didn't want parents going back and forth on the sportsplex, grab a beer, chug in the parking lot, and go back to watch their kids play sports. Because I don't want it to be an icebox. And so they actually made an amendment.
Yes, they made an amendment, and so the representative from the Family Dollar was there on Zoom, and he said sure they'd be into making that change. Most of their other ones do, but this one they said they could make an exception. So I think Melton made that amendment, and then that passed 6-0. Surprising no one. Okay, so then nothing got removed from the consent agenda. That was all passed 6-0. And then so if you don't already subscribe to the updates from the city clerk when the agenda comes out, you should, and you can just email cityclerk@cityofomaha.org and ask to be put on the city council agenda distribution list, because then what happens, like what happened last week, was they sometimes have amendments or additions, or if like a link is broken, they'll fix stuff, they'll let you know. So last minute they slid on item 92, which was the HDR contract for the library design. And of course it passed, but
it's like $500,000,
that
right?
was, yeah.
And so normally the agenda comes out Thursday around 3:00, and this one we think got updated Friday.
So
Yeah,
the
I think the
afternoon.
update came on Friday because I get that too. And that just felt icky to me.
Yeah.
It is
Yeah.
What's the rush?
it's like I'm taking this shit personally. It's like, really?
I know. And HDR, HDR, good old HDR.
Aren't they the ones studying Farnham as well? They're like the study group.
They're everywhere.
I feel like they got their hands in everything. And actually the CEO just got appointed to the airport authority board.
Oh yeah.
That was the last time we were just talking about. I mean, again, HDR is on almost every agenda. I feel like they get contracts galore, unfortunately.
But they're the ones specifically, I think it's $1 million or $2 million to study if Farnham Street should be 2 ways.
Oh, that study. Okay. There's so many studies.
I can't wait for that neighborhood meeting, Lori.
Yeah.
Like, should Farnham be 2 ways? Like,
yeah.
let's
How
just
many people have
just
had
stay on
their-
this
There's
court.
gonna be, I mean, I can't even, I should just not even speak.
Oh, why not?
I mean, tonight about this while we're recording, because there are so many people in my neighborhood who are just like, change this yesterday,
Right.
please.
Right.
And, we've been hearing from the city now for literally years that, maybe. And then now it's like everything's tied to the UNMC next development with the old, bearings plant and all of that. And basically, we've been told that it's basically guaranteed that it's going to happen then, but it's all coming out of the UNMC development. So it's like tied with that, and the city won't do it on their own because they'll probably be able to get some money if they tie it to the UNMC, and maybe there'll be some federal money too, who knows. But it's like, could we just like do the right thing because it's the right thing to do? It's 11 fucking blocks.
Right.
No, we gotta study it.
I know. And
We
then
gotta study.
yeah, I mean, there aren't too many issues, I feel like, where neighborhoods have made their own like pretty nice yard signs, like the Fix Farnham signs. Those are pretty. We have one in our front yard. We don't live near Farnham, but we still appreciate the cause. But yeah, like, I mean, just again, showing that sometimes feels like the people in decision-making seats aren't necessarily listening to those of us that these things affect every day. I mean, how many people along Farnham have had cars in their front yards or through their homes, or, I don't know how many deaths and near fatalities and crashes of all sorts there have been.
All the near misses that are not tracked.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I know I've told you guys this, but for the benefit of those who haven't heard it before, Chris Jerem told me, so, former city council president from our district, District 3, Chris Jerem said that was one of his regrets about not not being able to get that change made while he was in office.
That would have been a good one.
Do we know where
Let me
Begley
see.
stands on Farnham? Or fixing Farnham?
I feel like
He's heard about it.
Okay, so we heard about it.
yeah, I feel like, I mean, honestly, like Lori was saying, like they're just saying it costs too much money. That's, I mean, although we just gave UNMC 130 million for parking garages, that was a worthwhile expenditure, but we can't fix a street where literally people are dying. Ugh. Rah. All right. Serenity now. Okay, we're gonna keep rolling because it's 8 o'clock. Okay, so we talked a lot about how, yeah, what all.
So there's no
happened
meeting,
last
there's no
week.
meeting next week,
Yeah,
but there is one on the 29th, 28th.
29th. Yep.
And so you can look at the agenda that came out last week,
Here, I'll do a little screen share.
and usually they stop at non-action items, or the normal meeting will stop at non-action items. But usually what
Keep
non-action items
scrolling.
is, so we can read ahead. That's what's coming like
Consent,
2 and 3 weeks ahead.
ordinances,
Yeah.
And then you're like, okay, this is all just blah, 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 final reading, second reading,
There you go,
non-action items. So then it'll tell you, okay, there's not a meeting this next week. However, you can kind of start getting a feel for what we're going to be looking at for the 29th. So, it starts off with some planning stuff once again. And then it'll show you a lot of TIF is what's coming up. We're going to talk about this next. So, 77 through I think 81, these are all TIF requests.
Wow.
And then I guess just to continue on, we'll go back and dive into some of this, but $24 million sanitary sewage revenue bond. This one's kind of interesting. The Omaha Performing Arts Society has actually decided that they don't like the requirement that the mayor has to appoint one of their board members. Good for them. Rarely do I agree with the OPAS Society, yeah, but that was kind of an interesting one. Oh, and then the streetcar stuff.
And who?
And then there's so much. This one's about the epidemic health director. I'm gonna stop screen sharing and then I'll go back to our notes. What were you gonna say? Sorry.
Just who was the person that the mayor appointed? We looked it up
Which one?
for the Performing Arts Society.
Oh, I don't remember. I have the notes.
That's fine.
It is. Was it Schlossberg?
Yes. Very good.
Spruce Capital. That
Yeah.
Schlossberg, his name's on a lot of stuff. Anyway, okay, so the stuff that we just kind of breezed through in the non-action items, that'll actually all come out next Thursday on like the actual agenda for the 29th. But the things that we thought were interesting were, we just talked about how much neighborhood opposition there was to that Saddle Creek development project that's, at about Pacific. They are going to have an opportunity to speak again if they'd like, because that $5 million TIF request is coming through. Then item 78, which these numbers will all change obviously when they redo the agenda for next week, but that is the $63 million TIF request for the Mutual Omaha redevelopment, which is where the Dale Clark Library is.
And then before you move on, so the Mutual of Omaha TIF, usually it'll show up at non-action items. It'll say laid over for several weeks so that there's enough time for the public.
Yeah, to advertise for public hearing.
Yeah, like it specifically says that. That Mutual of Omaha TIF showed up last week for the first time with only 1 week layover. It's the quickest TIF turnaround. And again, it's like, what's the rush? We know what the rush is, but I thought that kind of speaks volumes of how quickly they're rushing this TIF through.
And they've been saying that throughout all this, like, okay, it's a real short time frame. Like we have to, this has to happen so this can happen. It's all.
And then so 63 million. What was Crossroads? Was it 70? This is the second biggest TIF request.
Yeah, this is a big one. The total project is like 443 million, I think. And of course, I like to nerd out and look at the attachments and look at the line items. And $92 million of this project is for the 2,200 parking garage. 2,200 parking stalls in their garage. I was happy to see, because I was starting to get all fussy when they showed that initial rendering of the new Project Beacon, their giant skyscraper, that the first like 10 floors were going to be parking garages. And I was like, why are we talking about complete streets when we put parking on the main level? They are going to put a vibrant lobby on the ground floor, and then parking will be the next, I think, 10 floors above that, and then however many more for a whole lot of office space when it's 2022
even
and
said
people
that
don't want to go back to their office.
Ground floor parking is an eyesore. They even
Yeah.
said that themselves. Like, we're gonna lift it up
Yeah.
one floor.
Yeah, yeah.
Problem solved.
Vibrant private lobby, exactly, Lori. It's just like, oh my goodness, yeah. Empty office space, huzzah. And okay, so also that 2,200 number for the number of parking stalls that'll be at the, the beginning of the building, that's not enough parking. So that's why they're relying on the streetcar, so that they can have the rest of their staff park at other parking garages and parking districts throughout this urban core. And yeah, so just so much free
And then the-
parking, which they contradict themselves in, because we'll get to this in a minute, but there's a whole 40-page document about the new urban core housing and mobility redevelopment plan. And first of all, it looks like it was written by a third grader. And secondly, it contradicts itself. It's like talking about how we need to get rid of parking, and then it's like, but also we're going to build parking. Like, it just make sense. I don't like it.
And then the Mutual of Omaha parking garage is going to be owned by the city.
Okay, so the Mutual of Omaha parking garage. So of those 2,200 stalls, I don't know what percentage is going to be. Oh, that's a different one. That's the Blackstone one.
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna get to that.
So many parking
Because
garages.
I literally cannot keep track
We
of all
should
these
change this
parking.
to the parking garage chat.
Ugh, parking club. Huzzah. Oh, Manny's here. Hooray. Okay, good. Manny will love to talk with us about parking. Okay, so that was items. Mutual was 78. Okay,
So
real quick, we'll talk about the TIF request at 39th and Dodge, which is again market rate housing. 136 units, none of them affordable, and that's a $3.7 million TIF request. And then, did you want to say something? Because I'm going to talk about this Leavenworth one that Jen Bauer talked about.
You skipped over. So is the Mutual of Omaha parking garage going to be owned by the city?
I think that's happening in Blackstone, not Mutual. I think Mutuals is their
okay.
own parking garage.
So-
I think maybe some of it after hours might be, because in their parking and mobility plan, they were talking about how private parking is bad, and it should be in partnership with the city to allow folks to use parking after hours. Like, so if Mutual, they do like a 9 to 5, then 5 to 9 or whatever could be open to the public or something like that. So we'll see what happens with that. They'll again contradict their own plans by doing so, but it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, I'm just imagining if like the Luminarium. Do they have parking garage Luminarium?
Not yet, but we haven't seen all those plans yet.
Yeah, park them at the especially on the weekends. Open the Mutant garage up.
Hi, Manny. We're talking about parking. As
Nice.
Yes.
Did you see? I was just looking it up to find the article, but there's like this crazy story. This has nothing to do with the agenda. Well, actually, maybe it does. The guy who put all the structures on his house and was talking about how
Yeah,
We drove
Yeah.
by there.
yeah. We had to check it out ourselves. We're like, what is going on with that? Yeah, that's a doozy. What do you think about that?
I like it. I mean, okay, so here's the thing. You only get so much when you watch the news and things like that.
Right.
But it was interesting in what I saw and what I heard, how the problem was with the signs and not with the structure. So it was more like, we don't like your political signs. Oh, by the way, this structure is illegal. So that's what we're going to do. It wasn't just like, I wonder if he would have just like took down the signs if people would have left him alone.
Yeah, yeah. And now he's in jail.
Yeah.
To prove
He's like,
a
I'm
point.
not paying the fine.
Yeah,
I am
will
going to
go
jail.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some interesting signs out there. I
Yeah.
don't know. And then his neighbor's like, I don't know, the trucks don't shake my house, and I live right next door to him. It's like, oh boy. Oh,
Yeah.
good times on about 102nd and Center, if anyone's bored.
Yeah.
You're right, Rockbrook.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good times.
Yeah, the signs weren't that offensive. I feel like there's
And they changed though. The ones that I saw on the news were different than what we saw when we drove by. Like, there's a lot going on. I don't know. I didn't like some of them.
and then even the structure that he built for sound deadening is like,
And then water collection.
it's just some metal poles. There's a
Yeah.
bunch of metal poles and a couple of crosses too.
Yeah, a bunch of lit up
I'm like,
crosses. It's
Oh yeah, they didn't show the crosses as much. I thought I glimpsed that, but I didn't know if that was the metal poles or the crosses. So yeah, I don't know, the metal poles in front of the house I was like, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Whatever, you know, it was like a garage basically. No one complains about
Yeah.
garages in this
Right.
state.
Yep.
But yeah.
But if you talk bad about the mayor on your garage, you might get a letter.
Yeah.
True. All right. We're gonna talk about garages. Okay, this is a great segue. Thank you, Manny. This was totally apropos because
That's why I came.
yes, I knew you just lobbed me a good one. Okay, because what I'm gonna talk about is how Jay Noddle, who's God's gift to the planning department, was again presenting at the planning department. Was this last one or the one before? Anyway, there's a big new development at 54th and Leavenworth where the old Woolner's was, or I guess then now the old J Coco, and Legends and whatever. They are putting in luxury townhomes, and they're asking for 1.5 million in TIF, of course. And to hear Noddle talking about how it's on a transit line, but of course we're building 2-car garages for every one of these units. It's like, why do you always say both? Like, it just drives me nuts how, and he's like, yeah, we're moving towards that, but I would never do a project that doesn't have that much parking right now. It's like, okay, cool. So you are totally scared of being innovative and like with the time, I don't know, whatever. It was frustrating. And the neighborhood association came, Jen Bauer, who ran for city council, comes to council club sometimes. She was at the planning department or planning board meeting and requested them to work with her on like the color and a couple other things. There's actually, if you look at item 80, her letter from the neighborhood association is attached with some of her complaints or suggestions.
She can literally see, or she'll be able to see this new development out her front door.
From
So
her,
it's
yeah.
not only is it in her association, it's like in
a
her
block away from her
yeah.
house. But they were talking about how it does not, blend in with the neighborhood, and it's just like stark white and black, and all the other homes are, I don't know, whatever. And they kind of like, again, made fun of her a little bit, and like, that's cute. Maybe we'll work with you on the color. But
yeah, the very end that said maybe we'll
Yeah.
think about putting a mural that's on the
Oh,
side
yeah,
face,
a
the
mural.
side facing your house. Maybe we'll think about doing something there.
Yeah.
It's such
But-
bullshit because those townhouses, I know we're recording. I
That's
You're
fine.
I
good.
should just not speak when we're
No,
recording
keep it.
because
That's wrong. You
I
should-
well, I mean, yeah, sorry. Sorta.
Yeah.
So those townhomes, they're like $450,000 townhomes.
Yeah.
So, this is just a few blocks from my house. So I know this area very well.
Yep.
And the houses south of Leavenworth in that neighborhood are lovely, wonderful home, but pretty modest. They're like, 1.5 story, 2-story, like even in our wackadoodle housing market, like higher end would be like 300,000, I'm thinking. So to me, it's just like weirdly out of sync to be building these, super high end. I mean, that area of Exarban, Dundee, Elmwood is, working middle class. It's not, it's not, I don't know. It seems out of whack to me.
Yep.
Yeah, I think Jen Bauer said she couldn't afford to live there, or a lot of people.
Yeah,
from the
a lot of
neighborhood was
people,
like,
I
you
mean-
can't afford to live in
I
here.
mean, we own our house, and if we sold our house, I'm not sure we could live there.
Yeah.
Just like,
No, I just get so frustrated when like everyone just keeps talking about affordable housing, but like no one really wants to actually do anything about it, which we're going to get into in a minute, because I think we're just going to breeze through the next one, the Schooler redevelopment. They want 1.4 as far as TIF goes. And then item 82. So this is the urban core, like the housing and mobility redevelopment plan. And there is a public hearing on the 29th. So if anybody wants to talk about it.
This is basically streetcar, right? Or no?
This is, yeah. So this is it's kind of the trifecta of like, this is what allows them to create the TIF district so that they can finance the streetcar. I think it's hilarious that they call it a housing and mobility redevelopment plan when their lofty goal is to bring in 1,000 affordable units in the next 20 years. Like, in that whole freaking area, that's their goal, is 1,000 units. And
In 20
Manny,
years.
I see you maybe calculating something. Is that
That's just,
lofty goal?
that's embarrassing.
It
Well,
doesn't sound like a lot to me. but
it's
Manny-
like, what, you said 1,020 years?
Correct.
So is that, how many is that every year? Like 50 every year?
You're right.
Yes.
I'm good. I'm doing my math right. So, well, it's better than what we're doing right now. That I would say that, but yeah, it would be interesting to see like what's the mechanisms or like the funding to support that. You know,
It's there. I know. I feel like I read every word
Magic.
of this document. Yeah, I think
Magic.
a lot of it involves magic because
Yeah.
we got, oh, Mr. Bill, you already had your pill. Got a pill alarm going off for a little dog. Okay, so
Well, in that, I mean, they talk about creating 1,000 within that area, right?
yeah,
You look at that area though, and how many affordable housing units are going to be lost because people will be priced out. Like for example, you know, if you live at 30th, if you live at 30th and Cumming, just in Bemis Park there, so, you know, somebody I know does, or in a Cathedral Park neighborhood, if you're on a fixed income, your property values are going to rise, and that is also one of the, you know, it's like a three-pronged TIF approach, and so the you know, the increase in those people's property taxes is going to go to fund the streetcar, not the, you know, not everybody in Omaha.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's also, I think that's just such an interesting point because that's just displacement too, and how could you have policies to prevent displacement, which, you know, I get, that's a great point. You know, what does it mean if you create 1,000 affordable housing units and you lose 2,000?
right. Is that the net gain or is that what is
It's going to be a net loss. It'll be a net loss. I mean, that's
good point. Also, hi Mark, thanks for coming. So I have a lot of feelings, of course, about that. But they are hoping to get 356 million in TIF to build.
And you said they're taking TIF from other TIF. They're taking funding from other TIF projects. 25%.
They were saying something. I should find the language specifically, but there was somewhere in that, and maybe Mark, did you? It said something like 25%. But
it's a three-pronged approach. So any new developments in that area will of course be on a 20-year TIF schedule, but any existing TIF projects, so ones that were built 5 years ago, 6 years ago, the ones that were built 14 years ago that are getting ready to time out of their TIF and the money's going to go to OPS and the rest where it's supposed to go to my child's education, no, they're going to be extended. All those existing TIF projects are going to be extended to 20 years, so they'll get more money off of those ones. And so the original timetables or the original amortization that they presented for every single one of those at city council ultimately was a lie because, you know, the numbers then get changed. And then the third one is the homeowners, any existing properties already, they're going to say, okay, so now that the streetcar is going to be built at this time, any incremental value rise in your property. So my aunt lives there, my cousin lives there, all these people, everybody, I mean, again, are going, their of course their values are going to go up anyway, okay, for one, but their values are going to go up more. So one, like Mandy said, they're going to be priced out of the neighborhood. That's displacement. But secondly, it's really like, there's no way for them to point exactly which, because their property values would rise anyway. So there's no way for them to, like, I think it's illegal for them to say what percentage is attributable to the streetcar. It's really weird, you know, I mean, but the displacement thing is my big issue.
yeah, no, and thanks to Manny, we know that you can in fact write anti-displacement into your redevelopment plan. So why did we not see that here?
Yeah. Well, it's a good thing to ask about policies, because while there's stuff you can have in the plan, it's kind of like having affordable housing in your plan. How are you going to fund it or have something drafted formally as a policy that says X, Y, Z, you know? So that's the next step, but you can hold them accountable that way. So same thing with affordable housing.
Yeah. And does somebody want to take Noemi's question about does TIF take away from public school funding? Because technically, so tax increment financing means, and anybody jump in and correct me when I slip up here, but you buy something like the Dale Clark, for example. This project is fair market value $3 million right now. You put a $500 million development on it. You aren't paying taxes on this increase in value for 20 years if it's extremely blighted, or 15 years if it's just regular blighted. So that money that would be going to the schools isn't going to the schools.
Because all of our property taxes, like when we pay our property taxes, I
A
think it's
percentage goes
I
to
forget, it's over
OPS.
50% goes to OPS. It's the single biggest levying or the taxing authority. Some of the other money goes to the Papio NRD. I think some goes to Metro Community College. Some goes back to the city of Omaha. This is all where property taxes go. But when you get TIF, or when Mutual of Omaha gets TIF, they get their property taxes stays at the same level, even though they built this great skyscraper. And so for
It's
the
like
next,
a sweet loan. They're getting a sweet loan, basically. And, you know, we're all subsidizing it
Yep.
to some degree. And we're not putting any conditions on it. That's the part of it that makes me angry. It's like, if we're going to offer these super sweet development deals, you know, why can we not have some conditions put on them, like a percentage of affordable housing, a percentage of contracting to minority-owned businesses, a percentage of public services available, you know, through their mixed-use developments. I mean, there are myriad options that we could, you know, if people with imagination were making these decisions, with, you know, there are things we could do that we're just not. And that's partly what's so discouraging.
yeah, especially if you listen to the state legislator, they were talking about TIF, I think last week. And man, they pretty much unanimously said that Omaha and Lincoln, I think, but specifically Omaha, is abusing TIF. And they're just like sick of it. Yeah, and specifically Justin Wayne, he's been to the mayor's office. We know he's talked about how this is not why, because I think he helped
with the extremely blighted
blighted, yeah.
designation. Because like North Omaha, for example, that could be an area that's actually extremely blighted that could actually benefit from these big investments and improvements, but you aren't really seeing that happen there. They decide that, you know, the library is extremely blighted.
Yeah.
well,
I just want to say, like, with the extremely blighted, that's like, what should happen is they should just get rid of blighted areas and only have extremely blighted areas, is one way of putting it. But another way of putting it is the CRA map, which they use to anything within that area can get TIF. They haven't changed it, I don't think, since the 80s.
Yeah, I agree with you, man. Yeah, you're right. There should be no areas like, you're right. It should be changed. It needs to be
updated. It needs to be updated because
Yeah,
a
needs
good
to be-
example is Blackstone and Exarban, and now those people are going to be mad at me because they're going to be like, we want that money still, but it's the truth. Like,
It is the
they're not
truth.
blighted.
Right. And we brought that up actually. So we, this was several months ago now, I feel like, but when it was like, Blackstone keeps getting TIF, extremely blighted, this community redevelopment, blah, blah. And then for some reason, I thought that once the census numbers caught up, they would be like, oh, that area is not blighted anymore. No, it can be blighted forever until they go in and they undesignate it. So that's what's happening, is not happening. They're not going to undesignate it because now it's this whole TIF streetcar district. So now they have to continue to keep the whole area, which we'll look at a map here in a minute of the new redevelopment area for this project. And it's like, yeah, it's a huge swath. So, and that's why, actually, when I talked to Bridget Hadley, who's like the TIF queen, she was like, they'll never unblight Blackstone, because we were like, oh, we should get like unblight Blackstone t-shirts, like Blackstone's not fucking blighted. But she's
and even
like,
Don
yeah, no,
Seaton said that. Don
Yeah.
Seaton said, like, off to the side, it's like, I
Yeah.
agree, Blackstone is not blighted anymore.
Yeah. And yeah,
But-
same with Exarban, same with, like, there's a lot of areas that it seems silly to call them blighted when it's like, oh wow,
Yeah.
Warren
May-
Buffett's
Maybe we
headquarters.
need to have an awards, like give places like an award for not being blighted anymore. and then that's the end of it. Then they get undesignated. So it's like a happy send off instead of.
Congrats!
I only
Yay!
know of one CRA that had been undesignated, and that was TD Ameritrade in 2014. So they got TIF in 2012. They built the TD Ameritrade building out the old mill, and then as soon as the building was complete, they undesignated the area. And actually, TD Ameritrade paid their 15-year loan off in record time, like 3 or 4 years. But that's the only one, literally the only
That we can find.
CRA that has gone from blighted to unblighted, and it happened in like 2 years. So there is a process, and it can be done by the city council. And I also talked with Bridget Hadley. She said that maybe at the state level they're talking about doing an automatic, every time there is new census data, which does affect the CRAs, that should be updated every 10 years, because currently it is not.
It never gets touched. And speaking of TIF, everybody who applies for it gets it. It seems like
Except Paladino.
yeah. Ugh. Slumlord Paladino didn't get it. But other than that, like every developer that comes out with their little greedy hands open, like, yeah, they all get it. And the thing that sucks with that is it's always these mega developers that only, it's not helping smaller developers that, maybe could use some upfront capital or something like that. It's just like tax incentives over the course of
Well, and
years.
the just back to geography too, is like the mega developers, I don't know if I dislike any of them. But like if they would develop in places like North and South Omaha, then that'd be great too.
Yeah.
But why would they if they can just develop in an area that's not blighted?
Yeah, it's almost like there should be an incentive, like an exchange situation.
It's all about the return on investment. It's all about
Money,
money.
capitalism.
Yeah.
Green, yes, always and forever. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna pull up this map of this new area while you're talking about it.
So yeah, you get ready to talk about the urban affordable mobility, the streetcar. We're calling it streetcar plan.
Sure.
Well, it's twofold.
The Urban Core Housing and Mobility Redevelopment Plan.
So Sarah actually read, is it 40 pages?
I think it's 36. Yeah, it's a lot.
And my way of reading is I take it to Adobe Acrobat, because it's not searchable. You cannot search. It's just
Yeah,
all,
that's the other thing that's dog
it's
shit about most of
pixelated
the agenda.
letters, so it's not actually searchable. Because we wanted to see does the word bike even show up? It shows up once or twice
In their
on,
total
on
mobility
one
plan.
page, talking about mobility, talking about streetcar, talking about how we need to get away from using cars. And then they mention bikes in the same sentence with scooters. They're just like, oh yeah, and people like to use
For
scooters.
the last mile, like
Yeah.
not acknowledging that maybe. Also, there's no mention of the Harney Street cycle track or what will be happening there. Shocking no one.
They do mention the riverfront trail and what's the one
Field
that runs
Club.
up Field Club. So
Mhm.
they do mention trails, but
Yeah.
they do not mention the only protected bike lane. They do mention Harney Street only to say this is where the streetcar is going to go.
Yeah.
And so I feel like I think it's 50-50. I don't even know if it's 50. I think it's being generous to say that the protected bike lane on Harney Street is going to get removed to make way for the streetcar.
What do you think about that, Manny? Like, yeah,
I was my question was actually, does it say anything about Baby Bob? Because that's what I know. Okay, I like the Harney Street bike lane, but like that's the one project that I feel like has like super potential. Because like, has anyone been to Iowa, Council Bluffs, going over the bridge into their First
Yeah.
Avenue? I know you went in the middle of winter, so I went a little bit like a couple weeks ago, and I'm like, to be able to go from there all the way into Omaha, and then where that could continue momentum, and of course Harney Street, like I hope that stays, but I don't know.
not-
Did it say anything about Baby Bob?
It does say the Big Bob.
yeah, it says that at Riverfront, because they talk about the Riverfront Trail and how that's,
It
Yeah,
reminds
but
me, where does
it
the
doesn't.
Big Bob-
Any, in the whole thing, it doesn't mention anything about Baby Bob. No, but yeah.
Well,
potential for that.
maybe now it's gonna be Big Bob because the Bob Carey ate the other bridge, and now it's the Big Bob.
And to answer your question, the baby bob is gonna basically extend off of the end before it loops back towards the river and
Okay.
take you over the tracks.
Oh, sure.
And so that it actually connects into Fahey. So I used to manage a bike shop that was right down there, and we used to, I would take ladies ride. Lori, you've probably been on one with me. But we'd go on rides over the bridge, and you have to like go up and around, and I'm
Oh,
all
yeah,
for the
it's
baby
absurd.
bob. I'm just saying, if we've been talking about a fucking protected bike lane for over a decade, and it's still not even getting drawn into renderings of the new, it's just like insulting.
This plan was written, like you said, it's not searchable or anything, but it was written in like 3 or 4 days. You can tell it was.
That's what I said. I said it looked like it was written by a third grader or something.
It looked like they passed it off to the interns, like,
Yeah.
"Hey, here's your project. We need it by the end of the weekend. Get it
Yeah.
done."
Yeah,
And then
And that's so insulting.
So-
That is
so-
so
some
insulting to
intern
all
is
of us
crying.
who've been working on this stuff for so long.
yeah.
And not
Lots of
even
that.
me. I mean, all of you all.
Well, I'm going to show you some maps that'll make you cry. Okay.
It's even a bad map. It's
Yeah,
like
I know this
the-
map is also dog
The
shit.
black on black is really hard to see.
Yeah, you can't see this line very well, but it's showing the entire redevelopment plan area boundary. So it's basically the river to 50th, which actually 50th Ave, interestingly. I'm not sure why they wanted to make sure that it was like just past 50th, but anyway, so there's that. Here's the one that maybe should make all of us vomit. That's surface parking, y'all. So everywhere that is red is surface and orange is like a
construction.
garage. Yeah. So you can see how,
That-
ooh,
This is my new favorite map. This one right here.
my gosh. Yeah, it's so what's funny is, and then
that's a
they
fancy
they
one.
show you some more fancy colors. There's like, I don't really know, there's no what am I trying to say?
Oh, it's
Oh my
R.
God.
This is all like R9. So this is all the zoning.
Zoning.
Planning. Yeah. so-
Okay, again, super hard to read. Cool. Here's the historic stuff. What else was I gonna say? Oh, just as far as like in this report, it talks so much about, oh, here's the streetcar route, by the way, which I think everyone's probably already seen. Housing mobility TIF district. Again, we kind of talked about that. But yeah, so these are, this is what's all, oh, okay. I guess the other thing is this influence area, because they've decided that a couple blocks on all sides of the actual area is going to be also influenced. And then did anybody know, what is this about? The very last page is this information on LB 1209. Did anyone else look at that and get confused? Okay, I'll take that as a yes, we're all confused. But go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I have no idea. Okay, I'm gonna hit stop share.
It'll be fine.
Yeah, so
Streetcar's gonna be free.
I did think it was interesting how they talked about dignity while waiting for transit. I was like, oh, that's hilarious. All of a sudden now we care about that.
Oh, and
Some other
crosswalks.
ideas.
That there's gonna be
Yes,
crosswalks everywhere.
Crosswalks. That was I like had to text.
Now that white people are going to be the Mutual of Omaha people who are parking at the old complex and riding the streetcar to new downtown.
Yep.
Now we care.
Yep. Right.
Could,
Oh,
could you
wow.
imagine, could you imagine a
Lit.
Mutual of Omaha employee getting killed, not in a crosswalk, and then they put that in their police report? That family's gonna sue.
Which, okay,
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
sorry.
Well, oh,
Someone was
God.
just killed at 25th and Dodge at an intersection
Where there is no crosswalk.
Exactly.
There is
This
no
document,
crosswalk.
this document says every intersection has crosswalks or and I gotta find it now. But I was like, my head was exploding. I'm like, what is this? We're in the upside down again. Like they're saying that there's crosswalks everywhere, and I can't search this damn document, or
I
I
think
would.
it's like page 6.
Oh,
Will the
Oh my
streetcar will the
God.
streetcar have the same yield to pedestrian laws as cars and buses do? Is that like how streetcars work? Do they can they brake that quickly for crossing pedestrians?
Nope.
that's
Well,
I would think no.
I feel like they usually move a little bit slow. They don't seem to move as fast as cars, if that makes any sense. And they stop more often. So I don't know. Everywhere I've been that has a streetcar or a tram or something like that, it's like you almost have to. This is not the best thing to say, but you almost have to get like jump in front of it to get hit by it. Like you hear it and see it coming if it's designed well. And I mean,
So
you
it's
know.
more like a local bus route, like it than an orbit or a speeding car,
It's a
right?
local slow moving bus route.
But listen,
covers an
okay,
area.
wait. Let me add with planning background and such. It moves slower, but if it has like priority and space to move, it gets there faster as opposed to a car or at the same speed. You know, you still get like I don't know what the time would be from end to end on the route. It'll still be fast to use, but it doesn't have to move. Doesn't have to get up to like 50 miles or 60 miles an hour like people drive their cars down every road, you know?
The one fallacy
Yeah.
though is that it doesn't move from A to B. It doesn't move quicker than the orbit. So they're saying, oh, now it can be a walkable district. Like it's still, you know what I mean? And 2 blocks, that's 2 blocks away. And the orbit from end to end gets you there quicker, right?
See, that's the part I've never gotten. It's like because it runs parallel to orbit for so many of those blocks, it seems like unnecessarily duplicating an effective transit option.
When
Exactly.
we could be prioritizing areas of town
It's-
that are underserved
Mhm.
and have been forever.
Because the streetcar is
It's-
not transit, it's economic development.
It's going to be like what are those things in the airport that you like walk on to walk
Yeah, the, like,
faster? It's
moving,
kind of like that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly.
Super.
The flat escalators.
Okay, I have to read you this little part under mobility, which is one of the most important considerations in determining community satisfaction. Omaha has invested in the mobility of its citizens in many ways. That's the kind of language I'm talking about, third grader. Anyway, okay, so this crosswalk part, all of the elements of a complete sidewalk system exist to varying degrees in the redevelopment plan area. There is wayfinding in high pedestrian areas like the Old Market, Midtown Crossing, and the Blackstone District. Street trees elevate the landscape throughout some of the redevelopment area. Okay, here's the part. Crosswalks are clearly marked and protected with crossing signals at major intersections. On-street parking creates a safety barrier between pedestrians and street traffic throughout the, anyway. No, we don't have marked crosswalks. No, we don't. So let's take this document to them and be like, oh, cool, you all of a sudden care about marking crosswalks clearly marked and protected? Yeah, right. Yeah, right. It just drives me bonkers, but probably too much emotion for one little sentence about crosswalk painting, but that's where we're at. All right. I don't know. Yeah. So that's
So there's gonna be the mobility plan and then the streetcar authority. They're 2 separate things, but they're
Yeah.
both having a public hearing on the 29th.
Yeah.
That's gonna be a fun one.
Yeah.
You're gonna have Mutual of Omaha TIF at the old library location, and then 2 streetcar related
things.
agenda items to talk about
Yeah.
March 29th.
And the public health director.
And then
Yes.
that's, yeah.
We
there you
got,
go.
yeah. And before we get to that, so yes, Omaha, this interlocal agreement between the city of Omaha and Metro are forming a streetcar authority, which, yeah, Manny, you should be on that board. So you better get off this call because our faces are next to each other.
All right.
Anyway, but the mayor gets to choose some, Metro CEO who's decent, maybe she'll choose you, gets to choose some, and then the chamber. So maybe Steven will choose you. There you go, Manny. I don't know. Anyway.
Hey, one thing, if anybody does speak on this particular topic, please do bring up the fact that they're making a big fuss about that big decisions by the city that affect citizens of Omaha should be made by elected officials. You know, or like
Yeah.
Right.
accountability.
Bullshit.
The health, that's the whole health director argument. Okay, well, the Chamber of Commerce is not like, we don't want like that. That's bad. It's, you know, like we don't like that. Like they have no, you know, we don't know what the, you know, we don't know what their agenda is. We can't see their public. We can't see their minutes. We can't see, you know, like, so no, you know, like we don't want their representative. They can all be appointed by the mayor or Metro and approved by the city council. So there is accountability, like they said, just like the health director, right? It should be parallel paths.
Yeah. Speaking of just, you know, maybe not so transparent and like nonprofits doing certain things. There's a new one in that when we were talking about item number 82, which was the whole mobility and housing plan. There's a redevelopment plan area alliance, which is a new 501c3. Does anybody know who's on that? I don't. It's a question. It's not rhetorical. Okay, so anyway, that's just a new one that I hadn't heard of before. You know, we had heard of the Urban Core Alliance, which is a new nonprofit with like, what is it, Noddle, Lund, and one of the Andersons from the mayor's office, probably Troy. I don't know. Anyway, all sorts of shady stuff. So add that to the list. If anybody digs into it, let me know. Okay, another one I'm pissed off about, and then it's already been an hour. We get going and I can't shut up. But item 89 is $6.5 million TIF request for a new development at 37th and Farnham, which is majority parking. There's some housing, there is some, it's like mixed use, but it's $6.5 million in TIF, and it's for a parking structure.
That's the one you think that the city's buying?
That's the one that, okay, so the city is giving them TIF, and then once it's constructed, then the city's going to be buying, I believe $19 million is what we're going to be buying part of the parking garage back for. Once we give them TIF, then we're going to be paying them to buy. This just makes me sad, y'all.
And then also in that redevelopment plan, they have you said they talked about parking districts?
Yes, parking districts. Because basically the streetcar is just a circulator, you know, in the urban core from parking district to entertainment. But yeah, so this will be the Blackstone parking district lot probably, which I do understand they can't just put no parking anywhere ever. But if we forgot, we just looked at a flipping map where like half the damn city already is parking. So like, why can we not utilize what's already around, redevelop the surface? I guess, I don't know.
Parking district sounds so hip.
Everything's
Let's go hang out in the
fine.
parking district.
Yeah. I mean, parking districts are a thing. And actually Benson is going to be looking at doing metered parking as like a parking district. That would be the first one. So yeah, I'm not against parking districts if they are, because the thing is, then it'll incentivize people to park where, you know, it'll help turnover faster at the curb because that's your highest payment. So anyway, Manny can explain it more eloquently, I'm sure, but something like that, right, Manny?
I agree. Yeah, I mean,
And Ken Smith's been talking about that for years, but I just don't see him, you know, doing that much with it.
Well, now he has to, because apparently the streetcar is going to be operated based on the fees that the parking and mobility department is going to be collecting. There's just so many weird moving parts to this. I don't know. It's working. They're confusing people, and so people don't even hardly know the questions to ask. And if you could, they don't answer you anyway.
And so this past Tuesday, the library Noddle $500,000 design, Alex O'Hanlon spoke, and she made a good point. She was like, this was wrong, you know, a month ago. It's still wrong now. So for those of you that voted no a month ago, nothing's changed. You should vote no again today. And none of them did. Yeah. So the few holdouts, I think it was Begley, Johnson, Palermo, yeah, were the three that voted against the original. The lease, just the first steps of this library debacle.
Saying it stinks.
And they're all in now. So I have no hopes even that we're even going to get one vote, let alone four for none of this to pass. So yeah, I think
that's all done. The thing, I mean, now I kind of feel like with the library stuff, the way to go is to apply to be on the library board of trustees. There are 3 positions opening up in June. Also, there are going to be public meetings related to the new central library, blah, blah, blah. One of them coming up in early April is going to be held at Sorensen. I've been composing letters and supporting documents in my mind for weeks. And I drove, and I on one of my, I think yesterday or the day before, I was on my bike and I rode down to 14th and Jones And that building that they're gonna move, the materials, the lending materials
Mhm.
for the downtown branch. I mean, it is fenced off, it is under reconstruction now.
Yep.
So, it's that part's a done deal. I just, I hope there's still some tiny glimmer of hope that the central library could be somewhere other than 72nd and Dodge, although I think that's probably a done deal too. But it just, it should be downtown. It should be at the head of the park. That's where it should be.
No, and I feel the same way about streetcar and mutual. I kind of feel like the trifecta of the library, mutual, streetcar, urban, whatever. I kind of feel like it's all a done deal. It's specifically the way the city council has been voting. I don't see any light at the end of that tunnel. But I still feel like we should still try and workshop something to say, something to go and at least let them know that we're not happy about it. Yeah.
I want to ask them at this public meeting at Sorensen, what type of feedback do they feel like they've heard already? Like, how are they incorporating? Because there's been a lot of public feedback already in multiple instances. And so I want to know, have they heard that? Are they taking any of that into consideration? Or are we just starting all fresh and like all those people who've wasted their time already trying to?
I know, I'm with you, Sarah. They did that whole thing, toward the end of last year where they were gathering, supposedly all this public input about what library patrons wanted to see.
Right.
And, we were promised some big report reveal in March or April. I haven't seen anything yet. It's like people want more materials. They want easy access to their branches. They, it's like,
I want
it's
a
pretty
downtown
simple.
headquarters.
No, what we ended up, what they told us back was people wanted the downtown library demolished and give the lot to Mutual of Omaha. That was the master plan. That's been in the master
Well.
plan since 2010.
Yeah.
I've heard that so many times.
It's wild. That's a good segue to the last item, which is the health director change up. So that's item 90 if you're looking at the agenda from last time. But yeah, I think that the fact that they're trying to give it to the fire health guy.
That was Joe Stothart's old job,
Right,
by the way.
Yep. So my question is why, like, did Palermo piss off Stothart enough with like pushing back on the library stuff that she's like, you gotta be with me on this health department thing because you got some making up to do? Or why? Like what else would I'm sure she's holding something over his head because he was wearing masks at meetings. He wasn't part of the the Republicans who tried to sue over the mask mandate. Like, I don't know where that came from, but just another fun thing that we'll be having a public hearing on the 29th. So I think the 29th is going to be an action-packed meeting as far as.
Yeah, it's gonna be a wild one.
Yeah.
I bet you
Probably
the no
long.
mask, the chiropractor is gonna show up. I think they should make him the new health director.
Oh, geez.
Oh, fuck.
I think we need to like petition for that.
Dr. Tapper.
Yeah.
Ooh, so
Just
scary.
think about how amazing our immunity would be.
Oh, good. All right. Does anybody else have anything else want to say about all of that before we hit stop on the recording and then say more bad words?
Yeah, sorry.
No, hey, you've met me. I
Yeah.
say all of the words. Also, I just found out, Noemi, I'm sorry. We say a lot of bad words. And
I know. I think Noemi, I think you're still a minor. So
I know they're rad though. We're letting it slide. Yeah. All right. I'm gonna hit stop on the recording. Thank you. And we will do this again next week, which will be the 25th in preparation, the real agenda for the 29th. So we'll see you then.